Hey everyone, Liam from Solitude here. Thanks for coming back to watch another one of my videos. And I'm going to talk about this book that came out recently. I just made another video about Silverchair a couple of days ago. And I just really wanted to comment a little bit more about the band that I love so much from Newcastle, Australia, that is kind of back in the spotlight again because of this book and the ABC documentary which came out. So this book is written by the bass player and drummer from Silverchair, the bass player that being Chris Joannou and Ben Gillies on the drums. They probably wanted to make this after Daniel Johns, the lead singer, did his podcast a year or so ago. Because they were kind of not really involved with that, didn't want to be involved in it. Let me start off by talking about how this book works. Ben and Chris share writing duties. They go through their lives chronologically as they grow up in Newcastle and how they get into music and how they form Silverchair. There's also little anecdotes in between each chapter, usually in between where it changes from Ben to Chris writing, where they'll drop a little story about a tour experience or a funny little experience that happened while they were growing up together in Newcastle. And this kind of just helps the book flow along. So the beginning of the book I really enjoyed actually, because it kind of led me to reflect on my own experiences growing up, really loving music and trying to play music myself too. And I could relate to a lot of the things they were talking about, and if you're a musician or if you really like music, you'd just find it really enjoyable to read that. As the book presses along, you'll find some more interesting facts that Ben and Chris talk about, like how they got big in South America. They also put an end to the speculation on where the band name Silverchair came from. They also talk about what happened to the fourth member who was with them when they started, and how he kind of unfortunately lost his spot in the band because his family moved around. But the driving source of a lot of the content and a lot of the stuff that's interesting to read, in my opinion, comes from Ben. And I think he is probably the one who instigated a lot of the ideas around making this book and going to the ABC to make the documentary as well. He really does seem like a very headstrong person, and I could see why him and Daniel ended up clashing later on. He actually gives some pretty cool, bold opinions in this book about some of Silverchair's music that you probably haven't heard before. Like, for example, he talks about when they were making Neon Ballroom, and he said he actually didn't really like the sound of the drums in it. He also shed some light on his opinions of Young Modern, saying that he felt like the band was held back a little bit because of the tensions and control that Daniel was trying to put on the album. And he felt like the jams that they were having on Young Modern before any official recordings happened, when they were all working together collaboratively, might have actually been better than the end product. There's also a lot of funny little experiences that they like to share from their time touring. A lot of really cool name drops in there as well, some famous musicians and celebrities that they met in their time growing up. But overall, the thing that I probably wanted to say that I find the most interesting about this book is that if you compare it to Daniel's podcast, this is definitely a lot more of a celebration of Silverchair and talks a lot more about the positive experiences that all three of them had from being in this band, and how amazing it was that they were just a bunch of teenage kids who grew up together in Newcastle, who ended up becoming one of the biggest bands in the mid-90s in the world. Daniel's podcast focuses a bit more on the trauma that he experienced as being a child celebrity, which is still very interesting, and I really loved his podcast, but it was just a different angle, and both angles are completely fine and work well together to consume separately. The book also touches a bit more on why they ended up breaking up and how they've tried to reconcile their relationships with each other, but it just hasn't worked out. Daniel's podcast kind of brushed over this a bit, but Ben in particular sheds a bit more light on these issues. And I know a lot of Silverchair fans will probably be interested in this in particular, and it's maybe part of the reason why they want to buy the book. So I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I'll shed a little bit of light on some of the main things that Ben brought up as to why he felt like Silverchair broke down. Ultimately, he felt like Daniel wanted full control of Silverchair and the direction that he was taking the music when they were trying to make the sixth album was not what he agreed with, and it ended up just breaking down because of that. There was a lot of really interesting stories post 2011 indefinite hiatus announcement that they also shed light on, where the band tried to reconnect and it just didn't work out. For example, one big one around the middle of the book is when Ben has a 40th birthday party and he invites Daniel along. Ben says that they kind of cross paths there at the party but don't really connect. Both Chris and Ben talk about the 2019 Christmas party that Daniel instigates, where he invited both of them to his Newcastle home and tried to get things going again. I think one of the major breakdowns in this attempt, though, was the fact that Ben had just come out of an alcohol addiction, which he talks about a lot in the book, and Daniel tries to kind of get the meeting going, introducing alcohol, and it didn't seem like the party lasted very long because of that. Ben and Chris didn't really want to get involved in a social experience with Daniel that was going to involve alcohol. The last kind of devastating encounter to hear about that is mentioned in the book was a meeting that Dan and Ben tried to instigate with each other in a park in Newcastle, but it ended up falling through, and they haven't really spoken since, by the sounds of it. Overall, if you're a Silverchair fan, I would have to say this book is a must-read. There's a lot of cool, funny stories in there about when they were teenage kids and when they were touring the world and some of the interesting people they bumped into. It's a pretty easy read. It's only about 330 pages, and the font is quite big. So I got through it pretty quick, and I'm a slow reader. But thanks for watching this video, and I've got a bit more Silverchair content that I'm going to pump out too, because I think I just got a lot of new Silverchair subscribers. So thanks for tuning into Solitude, and like and subscribe. Cheers.